In this video, we're going to take a look at a few different ways that you can group tracks together for group processing and for better organization. So one way you can do it, it's kind of old school, is to take some tracks. For instance, I have these two pad tracks here, this Ion Snow pad and this Colluding Atmos track, and I could route both of their audio outputs to a new audio track for further processing and for volume control. Let's see how to do that. I'm going to make a new audio track. I'm going to rename it. I'm going to call it Pad Submix. And I'm going to route my audio to Pad Submix, Pad Submix. I'm going to make sure my audio from is set to no input. And this is going to make sure I don't accidentally get a feedback loop. The audio will still come from these tracks into here. I'm going to select in for my monitoring, and now when I play these, they'll both go into this track. And if I wanted to put plugins on here, I could do that, and it would affect, the sound of both of these tracks together, because they're both routed here. That's one way to do it. That's an old school way. I actually do it this way a lot in Pro Tools when I'm mixing, but for Ableton, to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense to do it that way. So I'm going to delete this track and change my audio on the source tracks back to master. So it's going out the master bus here. And instead, I'm going to group these tracks. I'm going to click and shift click to select both tracks. And then I'm going to press Command G. And this throws these tracks into a group. And I can rename the group. I'm going to call it Pads Group. And now these tracks both go into this track, and you can see it automatically routed the audio to the appropriate track. And this group is going out to the master. Here I could add plugins. I can control the volume. If I wanted to add an effect like EQ, I could do that. One common use of a group track is to add sidechain compression. Now, we are going to go over sidechain compression in greater detail in a later week, but I have a device already set up. And so if I add this compressor here, I'm going to take the audio from my drums. I'm going to filter that so that it's only taking mostly the kick signal. And now when the drums are playing, these tracks will pump in response to the drums because this compressor is on the group track. And that's a very common way to use submix tracks, is to add effects, to add sidechain effects. You can, in fact, nest groups together. So if I had a group here, I'm going to call this group stabs. And then I could group both of those groups inside a supergroup, and I'm going to call that not drums, because that's what they all have in common. So you can see that grouping is a great way to have group processing for your tracks. It's also an organizational tool. If I click on the group icon here, then I will hide all the tracks in that group. I'm going to ungroup these tracks from the not drums by choosing ungroup tracks. And now that group track goes away, and I'm left with my first level groups here. So I can hide my pads, I can hide my stabs, I'm left with just my drums. You can still hear all those tracks, they're just hidden. You can imagine that if you had a very large session with like dozens or even hundreds of tracks, that this could come in very handy. Now I'm going to ungroup these tracks So I can show you another way to enable group processing. And again, it's kind of an old school way, but still very valuable, good workflow to know about. And for this, I'm going to create a new return track. And I'm going to rename it. I'm going to call it pads. And now you can see that a new send C knob has been created on all of these tracks. And I'm going to crank up C for those pads. And I'm going to choose in my audio 2, sends only. So if we didn't do that, then we would be hearing double the volume of these tracks. We would be hearing them once in their individual tracks, and then a second time through return track C, and now we're just going to hear the return track. You can see these meters have become purple, indicating that they are set to sends only. And again, on here, I could put that same compressor, and it would work the same way. So now one benefit to using the return track as a group scheme is that if you need to set up different headphone mixes, like in a studio situation, or if you need to set up different output mixes for, I don't know, maybe like a remote broadcast or something live on stage, it's pretty easy to use these knobs as default faders for your custom mix. So now I've shown you 3 ways to group tracks together. You can create a new audio track and route the audio to that new audio track. You can create a new return track and route the audio to sends only and then crank up that send knob. Or you can use Command G to group tracks together and have a group track there. Each one of these options gives you a lot of flexibility for routing and processing audio and MIDI.